this week's chapter of Bleach, Nanao unleashes the power of her Zanpakuto, the Shinken Hakyoken, as she battles against the monstrous Quincy, Lil Baro. This week's chapter of Bleach was very simple. Almost nothing happened and we still get a lot of information, most of which come through the flashbacks in this week's chapter. The battle between Nanao and Lil Baro is pretty much just more of the same. We get to see her using her Zanpakuto, which unfortunately doesn't really seem to damage Lil Baro all that much, but it is an interesting fact that we learn that it can reflect all of his godlike abilities, in particular his light. She's actually reflecting it right back at him, but that's not going to stop him from using this giant halo energy attack, which looks really freaking awesome, and the fact that he has the ability to pretty much parry anything that she throws at him, which is interesting because I thought that she had this like god-destroying weapon, but it looks like she's going to need an extra pair of hands to make this work, and that's where Shunsui Kiyaraku comes into place, because we get a lot of flashbacks from him in this week's chapter, some of which are honestly kind of shocking. We get to see his brother for the very first time in the series, who looks a lot like Kugo Jinjo, at least to me. Remember the Fullbringer character? He's got the mullet and the frickin' eyebrows. He just kind of looks like that character. It doesn't help either that Kubo loves to make a lot of his characters look very similar to one another. But what's most important is we apparently get to learn that the reason that Nanao's mother is dead is because she was executed, because she actually gave Shunsui her Zanpakuto, the cursed weapon which belonged to the House of Issei, and because it went missing, she was executed because it was a lost treasure. That's at least what I'm understanding from what I'm reading here. So she didn't simply just pass away. She was killed by the Soul Society. Again, just letting us know that before Ichigo showed up, everything in Soul Society was pretty frickin' hardcore. Now, with this in mind, if this is actually how this is all going down, this means the reason that Shunsui Kiyaraku is actually wearing that kimono and wearing those pins is to honor the mother and father of Nanao, as well as having to constantly carry the burden of having to hide this weapon and eventually having to give it back to Nanao in the first place. This is probably my favorite thing about this chapter, because out of all of the Shinigami in the series, Shunsui is one lazy bastard. He's always behind on paperwork, he never really wants to do anything aside from just hang out and get shit-faced drunk all the time, and this sort of explains why. He's been carrying this on his shoulders this entire time, and now it's time to pass on to Nanao, because at the very end of this chapter, he actually ends up helping her out in battle, almost as if he's assisting her with the weapon, and that's where it comes to a close. That's pretty much it. So what's the rundown on this week's chapter of Bleach? A very simple chapter, but one that I really liked, especially because the relationship between Shunsui and Nanao is really starting to change. He really does come across as an extremely protective uncle who's really looking out for her best interests, as well as trying to honor his loved ones, the father and mother of Nanao as well. I'm kind of interested to know why he has to help her at the end. I think it is kind of a bummer that unfortunately she isn't able to use the power of this sword outright. But then again, they do explain that she was never actually able to use a proper Zanpakuto in the first place, especially considering that she had her Asauchi weapon, it didn't really work out, she became a Kido expert, living with a couple of old folks. It's a very simple backstory, but they do get through it really quick. Again, the best part of this chapter for me, though, is definitely the artwork, especially for Lil Baro, who is still transformed into this weird, freakish creature, which just always ends up looking so cool. Just the way it actually moves its body, the way his neck is constantly sort of moving around, and his overall expressions are pretty fantastic. I'm kind of shocked that he was able to parry that ability, but it might have done some unseen damage that we haven't seen quite yet. We're just going to have to see more of how her Zanpakuto, the Shinken Hakyoken, actually works. Supposedly from last week's chapter, it's also mentioned that when it actually slashes something, or actually, like, cuts something, it's going to, like, turn it into, like, 8 different pieces, so maybe they're going to, like, completely seal Lil Baro away. I'm not quite sure, and I'm not quite sure how Shunsui is going to help, but his entrance in the chapter was pretty freaking awesome, especially when he just arose from the ground like a shadow right behind Nanao. Basically, he is her shadow. He's constantly looking out for her. It's both, like, a metaphor and an actual thing. It's pretty well done. And honestly, I really like the way that they're including the flashbacks into the action and how everything is just being incorporated. It allows everything to just flow a little bit better, and we're just going right through it, as opposed to just having, like, this whole arc dedicated to the flashbacks of characters, they're able to insert it in all of these interesting points, which allows you to care about the characters even more. I'm really interested to see how this battle is going to end. I really can't call it at the moment. I imagine, though, that Shunsui's probably going to give some encouraging words to Nanao, and that's when she's going to unleash the true power of her Zanpakuto, but that remains to be seen. This week's chapter did have some pretty good character artwork and some cool action scenes, most of which were coming from Lil Baro. He just looks really cool, especially when he was charging up that big Frieza-looking attack, which literally looks like a giant halo of death. Really cool design right there. So at the end of the day, this was a very good read of Bleach. Great artwork and a fantastic cliffhanger ending, expanding on the characters and giving us some more flashback sequences of things that we've never seen. Pretty solid chapter right here. I really enjoyed it, and I'm surprised because I'm usually not a big fan of when a flashback takes charge of like 90% of a chapter, but I'm really enjoying it. It really is making the character of Shunsui look a little different. It's painting him in a much different light, and I actually really like that. They're turning him from this one-note character into someone who's a little more complex. So, I'm going to give this chapter right here a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really solid, and you should definitely check it out if you're a fan of the Bleach series. But before you guys leave today, if you did read this week's chapter of Bleach, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Make sure to tell me about your favorite moments, the whole backstory that's going on with Nanao and her mother and father, and what you think is going to happen in the final battle against Lil Baro. And make sure to tell me what you want to see from the final arc of the Bleach series. Thank you guys for watching this review. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!